Hey everybody, welcome on in. This is a new type of video. I've never done anything like this before, but I'm very, very happy, very excited with it. I just finished an interview with Brian F., Street Fighter, content creator, YouTuber, Twitch streamer, competitor, and also a survivor of testicular cancer. We had a conversation about his cancer journey, his diagnosis, the surgery, and what came afterwards. And I think this is a really, really good conversation to have to raise awareness for testicular cancer. And also, we are promoting a tournament, a charity tournament that I'm doing this Monday, April 29th, online Street Fighter 6 tournament. Sebastian's first annual Ball Out for charity. We're going to be raising money for the Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation. All of the money that's raised is going to go directly to support cancer patients who are struggling with their treatment. So we sat down talking to Brian F. And I guess we could just roll it. Just roll it. Go ahead. Okay, I am here today with Brian F., well known as a Street Fighter competitor, content creator, YouTuber on Twitch. If you follow Street Fighter at all, you are aware of the name Brian F. Brian F., thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
And we both love Street Fighter. I think we both love fighting games. And we also have something else in common, which kind of brings us together, which is not the greatest topic in the world. But we both are survivors of testicular cancer, and we're kind of gonna talk a bit about our experiences. I want to get to know you and your experience, and see how that fits, if it does fit, with our experiences in fighting games and in Street Fighter. So first off, I want to just ask, how are you doing now? Like, what's your life look like now compared to when you first got your diagnosis?
Sure. So, I mean, it's weird. I consider myself very fortunate because all things considered, it was a pretty, I don't know, easy experience, I almost want to say, which is a strange thing to say about it because really my life today is, and hopefully it can continue to be that way, it's not impacted at all really by my diagnosis because fortunately it was caught early enough. And so far I haven't had to go through any chemotherapy or anything. And the type of cancer I had was like seminoma, which is one of the slowest progressing cancers and most easily treatable as well with the chemotherapies available. So in case it got to that point, I feel very confident in our modern science to take care of things. And the weird thing is, the reason I was even able to be diagnosed was I was going to the doctors for other unrelated symptoms.
Really?
Yeah. So I was, and I still never had any formal answers of what I was experiencing. I was experiencing severe like brain fog, and I would have severe episodes of like extremely, it would come in like I could feel the symptoms progressing where it'd be like a day I would wake up and I would feel more and more chilled in my extremities, like my hands and feet, and then my brain as well. And it felt like my blood was not reaching any extremities. That's the best way I could describe it. It felt like my brain was falling apart. If I was trying to speak, I would be stuttering. I would be slurring my words almost. It just felt like juices weren't flowing, and I would start to shiver. I would get to the point where I'd be shivering cold, and like I felt like I needed to roll like a burrito into a blanket and be under a heating lamp to like regain my warmth. Like I was a chick that was just born and thrown to the cold and died. Like, it was very strange. And so I was just having a bunch of like weird experiences like that, and it was just concerning. Like it was impacting my day-to-day life to a degree. And so I had a bunch of just random symptoms like that of I feel like crap sometimes, right? Which is always the hardest thing to get help with at the doctor. And according to every test forever, I was healthy, super healthy. Oh, you're young, you're active, nothing's ever wrong. And in the middle of all that, I remembered like, okay, I've taken every blood test ever. I've seen all these other specialists, like, hormone specialist, whatever. I've done all these tests to figure out what's going on. Do I have diabetes? Is this metabolic? Is this like this, that, the third? And in the middle of all that, I was like, well, every once in a while, my right testicle aches a little bit. Like it was just like a little like, and I'd seen a doctor. This was in 2021, I would say.
Okay.
And I had seen a doctor in 2019 because I was like, okay, occasionally I had these random aches since 2019. I'd seen a doctor at that point. And I said, occasionally my right nut aches a little bit. I don't know. I tried inspecting. They always tell you to do the technique. You go there and try to feel around. But first of all, there's a bunch of biological structures there,
Yeah,
right?
there's a lot. There's a lot more than you might think to kind of
right.
like that pops out. Yeah,
Right, there's the testicle itself, and then there's I forgot the terminology,
the
the thing that
epididymis
wraps
or
around
whatever.
it,
Yeah, yeah, the
the
epididymis,
vesicle,
I
or
think.
whatever it's called,
Yeah.
and that's textured, and then that's where the tube
Yep.
connects and all that. So it's like I don't know I can't visualize what I'm feeling,
Right.
and maybe it's just me, but that started to give me like anxiety about it. Like I didn't even
Yeah.
want to like feel around there because, and I kind of developed a complex about it. I was like, I don't like firmly inspecting all that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, something about it just really kind of disturbed me. It was like, I don't know. And like, I don't want to feel something. I was like, is that a bump? I don't know.
Right.
And then suddenly I'm just freaking out about nothing. Right.
Yeah. It's that WebMD thing where it's like you look up certain symptoms and it's like, oh, now you
Yes.
have cancer, and it is kind of a sensitive area. It's also a sensitive subject, and I think for a
Right.
lot of guys, it's like even the suggestion that something could be wrong is enough to deter them. Were you ever taught explicitly by a doctor like how to examine yourself?
No, I mean, I think I had like a book when I was going through puberty at one point as well, like one of those. Here's a developing boy. Here's a book my parents chucked at me as well with all of like the sex ed stuff, and it mentioned how to like inspect yourself for that. And I read online here and there.
Right.
So I never had any. I don't think I've had any formal instruction from a doctor. And the guy I saw in 2019, he inspected me, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so like I had to have another dude
Yeah.
get down there, which is obviously a weird ass experience.
Yes, it
and he's like,
is.
"Oh, you're fine." Like, he brushed me off right away. So
Man.
he said there was nothing wrong, and maybe at that time,
Yeah,
I
it's
don't know, I feel
possible
like
at that time nothing was there. But I mean, the
I
ache,
suspect maybe there was.
Yeah, with the
because
ache, for sure.
My diagnosis when it did come, it was 1B stage, which means
Okay.
it still
Yeah.
hasn't spread, but it's a larger tumor. And I
Yeah.
forgot the exact size, but it was a sizable tumor.
Yeah.
And so they suspect that it had been growing for a while,
Right.
but because it's such a slow progressing cancer, fortunately none of it had spread.
Mm-hmm.
And but at that point, once I complained with my other doctor about all those other symptoms, I said,
Right.
"Can we just get an ultrasound? Just like, I don't
So
want
you-
any more manual inspections. Just give me an
Wow.
ultrasound, and that way we can get it done with."
So you
And-
actually advocated for your own ultrasound?
Yeah, that's one thing I learned through this whole process. And that's what I talked about a
Yeah.
lot, is to complain a lot.
No,
Like,
no,
advocate
absolutely,
just for yourself.
absolutely. I think the one thing I tell people about my experience is like you have to be a bulldog with this like medical institutions and how things are set up in the U.S. I'm not gonna get too far down that rabbit hole, but like you kind of have to be on your team 100%. That's incredible that you
Right.
were like, can I just get an ultrasound? I mean, and that is.
I did
why-
research into it, right?
Okay.
It's because I had that experience with the other doctor where I was like, I swear something's like this whole time. I don't feel good, right? And
Right.
even then,
Yes. Something's wrong.
even then, what I was experiencing, I don't even think that was related to what my other symptoms were, but I just knew.
Mhm.
I was like, my quality of life is not good right now because I have days where I wake up and I just can't function and I feel terrible.
Mhm.
And so I was at that point already like advocating for, I sound like a crazy person. I'm sure my doctor thought I was insane at that point because I'm asking for so many tests. You know what I mean? Like I'm
Yeah,
entering hypochondriac territory at
Mhm.
this point. So I said, look, just give me that. I don't want to have another doctor just feel around and not find anything.
Right.
And so lo and behold, I go, it's a funny story with the ultrasound. I go in and I'd already done a bunch of ultrasounds. I've had my liver, that. I've already been scanned up and down the wazoo,
Yep.
but never there. And so it's a weird experience, it's
It
a woman
is.
there.
It's-
It's a prop your junk up, and you lay there with a
Yeah.
towel covering the area, and they're
the cold
pressing
dew.
a device up against you, and it's
Yeah.
cold.
Yep.
And I could tell something was up because, I mentioned the other reason I was suspicious of that area is because that testicle, this might be TMI. When I was in middle school, back in the day,
Yeah.
guys used to play the nut check game,
Oh
which
my
I thought was
God.
insane,
Terrible.
even back then.
Yeah.
But I got hit in the balls when I was like in 6th grade at one point, and it
Yeah.
was the same testicle where I developed cancer.
Yeah.
And ever since then, like, it hurt for like 3 or 4 days straight.
Yeah.
Because it was the right kind of contact, just like
The wrong
the
kind of
friends were
contact.
hitting each other in the nuts. And I don't know if that influenced it, but I'm suspecting I had some sort of scar tissue or something from that day, and that led to this. Because when I went to the ultrasound, I was like, I got hit one time, the nuts pretty hard, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I can tell." And then she's like,
On site.
and I'm
Dang.
like, you can really tell? She's like, I can really tell something's here. And I was like,
Man.
And then after that, she was trying to small talk to get me through it, but she was being very nice. And she's like, oh, go
Yeah.
get a coffee. Yeah, whatever. You hear from your doctor. And I'm like, I'm
Uh,
dead.
Yo, the ultrasound technicians, like the radiologists, they know. I had a
Right.
guy, I had a guy do for my second diagnosis, and he went, "How long has it been since you had ultrasound?" And I was like,
Right.
"Oh, I'm cooked." I was like, "Oh, if he's
Uh,
asking me how long it's been," I'm like, "Oh no."
right.
But yeah,
Yeah,
they
it's
often
tough.
have like a sense about what it is they're looking at. I mean, it is their career
Right.
after
Well,
all.
they're not supposed to. For
No,
people who
they'll
don't know,
never say outright.
it's supposed to always route through your doctor first. They're supposed to be
100%.
collecting the data, and then they're supposed to tell it to your doctor, and the doctor's supposed to dispel the information back to you, right?
Yeah.
So the technicians are never supposed to let you know. But
Right.
it's like
Well, they'll drop hints,
that lady
though.
was like, "Oh, go get a coffee, have a great day. You know, you hear from your doctor later, like all sunshine and rainbows." And I'm like, I'm dead.
Yeah.
Like, I just knew. I was like, you're being way too nice
Yeah,
right now,
yeah. Oh,
prepping me to
man.
hear the bad news.
I wanna,
yeah.
that's kind of leads me into another thing that I wanted to talk about of just like the impact of like the diagnosis and did you, in my conversations that I've had with other kind of survivors, there's always that conversation of the people around you after you get a diagnosis, or maybe like in that between time between your diagnosis and your surgery or your diagnosis and your
Mhm.
treatment. Did you notice anything? Like, what was your experience after the ultrasound went through? You heard back from your doctor. What was that experience like for you?
Well, I mean, it was scary, but almost at the same time, for me personally, it almost felt like a relief
Mm,
because this whole time I've just felt something was off,
yeah.
and I've had no answers whatsoever. And even though this may not have been ultimately related to what I was going to the doctor for, I mean, I still had pains occasionally there, and that was still a slight idea in the back of my mind that something would be
Mm,
off, right? Because
yeah.
I'd be doing the dishes, and I'd be like, oh, is that an ache? Like, what's going
Yeah.
on? And I mean, is that just, yeah, sometimes your body just aches,
Sometimes your body aches. I had the
even
thought, I was
down
like,
there. Like,
yeah.
if your
I was
nuts
like,
are
do I need to
aching, it doesn't
wear.
necessarily mean you have cancer, right? That can
Right,
just happen.
exactly. Very true. Sometimes I was just like, do I need to buy like different boxers? Like,
Right,
or,
exactly. Yeah. So for in a weird way, it was relieving. It was like, okay,
yeah.
something has been found. And I feel like that's a pretty common thing.
Mhm.
Like the not knowing is by far the worst part. And the people I've
Yeah.
talked to a few people since then about going public about it. People have messaged me and I was like, look, like just get an ultrasound or do whatever you got to do
Yeah.
to eliminate the unknown. Because if you find something I mean, in a weird way, you're uncovering what needs to be uncovered, right?
Yeah.
It has to happen.
And it's better
So
to know, right? It's always better to
right.
know than to put it off.
Yeah, the more you know, I think the less, because I think the anxiety is just like what tears at you the most.
Yeah.
Um, and so once I got the diagnosis, I mean, the first thing, they don't officially give you a diagnosis. They say it's probably cancer. They don't give
Yeah.
you a diagnosis until they
Until
fucking cut
after.
your balls off.
Yeah,
Right?
it's very
Like,
true. Yeah. Yeah.
they got to cut it out and then they'll tell you what it is. But they said there's a tumor and
Hmm.
it was a bit heavy. I told my girlfriend, and I told after a day or so, I told my parents, my
Yeah.
family. But I just kept it between us, right? So
Yeah.
it wasn't really something that I shared with too many people
Hmm.
because I didn't want to share that until I had the surgery where they do the proper diagnosis and I know
Yeah.
what's going on because they don't know. I mean, I'd been scanned so that we knew there wasn't any crazy spread at that point, but
Right.
it's like how far up your tubes is it, or
Yeah.
is it
Yeah.
reaching your lymph nodes in that
Yeah.
area,
Hmm.
right? So I didn't want to like share it right away until I had an idea what's going on. It was
For
kind of
sure.
a personal thing. So I think it was fine for me. I mean, it was nerve-wracking to a degree, but
Hmm.
I felt like overall I was on the other side of it,
Yeah.
right? It was
Yeah.
the turning point finally towards making progress with whatever my life is going to be from this point forward versus before.
Yeah.
So there was some sort of emotional release from that.
Yeah, this is something that just came to my mind right now. Since you are, very public facing person, have you had people in your community or friends? Because I was very public myself, and I don't think there's any wrong or right way to do to handle like how you handle your diagnosis. I was very public, and I had a lot of people like from high school, from back in the day, like friends of mine, be like, "Hey, this is what I'm feeling. Should I get this
Right.
checked out, or what did you feel?" Or like a lot of people who came up to me Did you experience any of that or anything from like your community in that way?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like I mentioned before, I got a few DMs from people who
Hmm.
just follow my content, and they're like, they're going through the same thing I was going through of like just that weird feeling, the
Yeah.
unknown. And the healthcare system, it's so expensive and
Yeah.
prohibitive, and like we mentioned before, you really have to fight for yourself, and it's a lot of luck with getting a good doctor who'll listen to what you
Hmm.
say. Because, like, for example, the doctor I had in 2019 versus the doctor I had now since moving in 2021, night and day in terms of
Yeah.
listening to me. Like, I feel like that guy, I only went to him once in 2019. He would have called me crazy and brushed me off. Right?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with you. You're young and healthy.
Yep.
But the one I had in 2021 and beyond, I was like, yeah, listen, you're advocating for all these tests. You feel something's wrong. We'll go with the full gauntlet, whatever you say. And I mean, I took a lot of random tests. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of luck involved with that, right? So
Hmm.
having someone who you can at least speak to, went through that experience, I understand how important that could be to have.
Yeah.
So yeah, people reached out to me and I understood completely. And I've definitely talked with a lot of people and shared my experience even through just private messages randomly online. So I think a lot of guys, especially for that, testicular cancer, have those concerns because
Yeah.
it might be considered a little more weird to talk with certain people about, and
Hmm.
it's just a strange active area, which sometimes you can't tell what sensations you're experiencing. So
Yeah.
I understand people being paranoid about it. So yeah, people would definitely reach out to me.
Yeah, it's sensitive. It's a sensitive area to talk about, especially with someone that you might not be like too close or familiar with. And I
Right.
think like the more we talk about it, because this affects, this is the most common cancer for
Yeah.
guys 15 to 35. And so it's like this is kind of what we need to be, we need to just be aware of it at the very least. Um
Hmm.
you mentioned at the beginning that it was an easy experience for you, so relatively easy experience for you, and I completely understand what you're saying when you say that. But I wanted to ask, do you ever feel like any type of like imposter syndrome with like your experience or your diagnosis? I'm curious just to hear your thoughts on.
You,
Uh,
I didn't consider that until you mentioned it because
oh no.
maybe you'll diagnose this as imposter syndrome. I don't really feel like I went through cancer straight up.
Yo, but you did.
Yes, but I
I know exactly where you're
there
coming
is a
from.
big you can disagree with me. Maybe
No,
you're
that's fine.
exposing my own psychological barriers that I put up,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
But I feel like there's a big difference between the process I went through, which
Mm-hmm.
was they found a tumor. My surgery was suddenly scheduled for a couple weeks later.
Yep.
I fell asleep. I woke up. I was sore for a couple days, and I'm back to normal. And I'm like, wait, what just happened?
Right. Yeah.
Right? Because for me, I was very fortunate in that it was just the one tumor, and so far
Mm.
since then, there was no spread. I've been almost. It's going to be 2 years in September
Congrats.
of no spread. For hopefully, every 6 months I have my CT scan follow ups, and
Yep.
things could change, right?
Right.
So there is that in the back of my mind, but um, beyond that, not having to go through chemotherapy is definitely a blessing. Like that is to
100%.
me where most of the struggle comes from
Mm-hmm.
for this type of cancer if you are forced to go through that. So as someone who hasn't been through that, I can't claim to know the full experience, right? I feel like I'm very fortunate in that sense. So I'm not going to say my experience is the same as someone else. I think this is something that's very personal. Like your experience
Mm-hmm.
will vary based on what you've had to go through and the
Yeah.
support you provided, which is also luck where you live
Right.
in the world, what doctors you
Yep.
have, what healthcare system you can get a part
If
of.
you're insured or not.
Yeah, exactly. Your
Mm-hmm.
financial barriers, which is all BS, but that's the reality of it.
Yeah.
Um, so I really do feel like I've been very lucky in that sense. And so I don't claim to have been through something as severe as someone else. And I think that's fine for me. That doesn't bother
Yeah.
me. But yeah, I'm wondering what you think about that.
No, I resonate with that really wholeheartedly because that was something that I remember I had a conversation with a friend of mine. It was about, this was in early 2020, and it was maybe 6 weeks after my first surgery. And I was like, oh, I had that medical thing, whatever. It had caused some like disturbances in my professional life, all this stuff. And I had to cancel a bunch of auditions. I was like, oh, I had that medical thing. And he's like, cancer. He's like, bro, you had cancer. I was like, yeah, but it wasn't really. He's like, no, 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 no. He's like, you don't have a right nut anymore. Like you had, like he
Right.
very, very, and it was like the first time that I had somebody just be like, hey, Like I see what you're saying, and nobody. It's not like anybody was claiming that. I guess we are coming from a position where it's like I know how bad it could have been, and I know how bad
Right.
some people do have it, and I don't want to claim that. But at the same time, it's like
Like stolen valor for
right. But at the same
yeah.
time, it's like I think we do have to say like this is a valid cancer experience, and one, this is like the cancer
Sure.
experience for this particular cancer that we want people to have, and for people to get it caught early, to have the surgery, and then to move forward. And I think that's like I totally understand where you're coming from. And if it wasn't for that friend, I definitely would be in a similar vein, because it's like I had a very, very similar experience. I had a diagnosis. I had a surgery scheduled some weeks later. I fell asleep. I woke back up. For me, my like recovery process took maybe 3 weeks until I was like
Right.
back up and at 'em again, and then it was moving forward from there. So it is an interesting, there was this mindset for me of like, I'm not a real cancer patient, or like I'm not a
Right.
real
Right.
cancer survivor. And it did take some time for me to kind of own that a bit. But it all looks different. Cancer as like a disease is so varied and broad and has so many different
Yeah, I think
ways
that's
that
one
it
of the main
shows.
things that I've really started to digest since going through this. Because,
Yeah.
yeah, like you mentioned the WebMD syndrome. Like, as you could tell with my original rant about why I got into
Yeah.
looking down this path, I've done so much WebMD, or like
Yeah.
absurd amount. I know more about so many different types of cancer now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Since 2021 and beyond, since I
Yep.
started looking into all this, and especially with my own diagnosis. So, um, yeah, it's something that I no longer view as one disease, and
Right.
I knew that before, right? I knew cancer wasn't cancer, but now I know different names of different cancers,
Yep.
and like
Yep.
different subdivisions, and then
Yep.
their prognosis, and then
Uh-huh.
how it spreads. Because I think before that, even when I was especially when I was younger, it's just the C word. I don't think it's
Yeah, it's really
explained very
scary.
well to the general public. It's just like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you're sick, and then you're dying,
Yep,
and then you're
exactly.
dead. And I'm like, what is actually happening here?
Yeah.
And then as you get older, you learn, okay, your cells are, or they're multiplying uncontrollably, and you don't
Yep.
have any control of this, and then tumors spread and can impact. But then I learned more about the prognosis, about how that actually spreads through the body, and which parts
Yep.
it can spread to, and the different prognosis for different types of cancer. So I've learned a lot more about it. So to me, I've definitely started to divide and understand the disease a lot more.
Yeah.
Not as a doctor, just as a person who's
Yeah.
experienced it. But so I think that understanding is good to have for the
Yeah.
public, and I think for testicular cancer specifically, I do view my experience as definitely being very different from someone suffering like pancreatic cancer or something with a
Yes.
worse
Yeah.
prognosis, right? I do think it's extremely different. I don't view them at all as the same disease
Yeah.
anymore. But I think also sharing this, it's not to downplay it. I think it's
No.
also very important to not be scared to find the answer, because that's harkens back to what we
Yeah.
were talking about earlier. I was nervous about inspecting myself, or
Yeah.
there was a weird phobia. I was like, I don't really even want to find anything, or
Yeah.
turn over this rock, but really you have to.
Yeah.
So I think the examples of like my personal experience has been very fortunate.
Mm-hmm.
I almost feel like that could be reassuring to someone who's concerned,
Yeah.
because hey,
100%.
life goes on. Like for me, I
Yeah.
have had zero reduction in quality of life. And since then, with my other symptoms, I found some other lifestyle stuff to improve what I was going through. So my quality of life has improved significantly
Yeah.
since my surgery and
Mm-hmm.
all that. So life got better for me.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's important to share as well.
Yeah, treatments can work, and treatments can help and move you forward. I think that's a hugely positive message for anybody who might be listening to this or watching this. Let's talk a little bit about, have you found any, if at all, while you were going through that experience, kind of preparing for the surgery, the diagnosis, did you find anything that related to your fighting game experience, or your you have this commitment to excellence, I think, in Street Fighter, that is very kind of scientific, but also like has a lot of heart. And I was just
Mhm.
wondering if any of that bled into how you face this challenge in your personal life.
It's interesting perspective to think about. I, I'm honestly not too sure, because I think a big part about this is you're not fully in control, and
Yeah.
I think that's the scariest part of it all. I'm kind of a control freak, and and that's manifests itself in different ways. Like even with flying, like there's
Mm.
been times where I don't have flight anxiety, but if there's like extreme turbulence and I'm starting to get a little nervous about it, I go, well, what the hell are you gonna do about it? If this plane's going down, it's going down, you
Right.
know? So
Yeah.
you might as well let go, right?
Right.
Like if I
Yeah.
ever have those feelings creeping up, I'm like, whatever, man. Like, let's enjoy the thrill ride, right? You know.
Yeah.
So with the cancer diagnosis and all that, I mean, I was in control of advocating for myself, and so I fully
Mhm.
embraced that to get the help and support that I needed.
Mhm.
But beyond that, it was very much like, okay, this isn't like you're training for Street Fighter or whatever. You have no
Right.
control here. Like
Yeah.
you're entrusting. You have to entrust the system. You have
Mhm.
to, do your due diligence, investigate the options you have. There was a lot of research into the medical providers that I had in my area, whatever, and figuring that out. But beyond that, once you make a decision, you have to trust these people.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, like my life is literally in your hands right now,
Mhm.
and that's a very humbling experience, I feel like. So I think it's just learning also to understand when there's times where you can't control things.
Yeah.
Same thing with every time I go into a CT scan, right? So
Yeah.
I'm usually not very anxious, for my schedule. It's like every 6 months there's a
Mhm.
follow up, and that'll shift yearly at some point, and then after 5 years,
Like the
that's when you're
3-year
considered
mark.
officially in remission, right? I think
Yeah.
the 3 year mark they switch to a yearly. Then
Yep.
after those 2 years, and you're in remission officially. Uh, so when that scan comes up, a little bit of those feelings creep up, right? It's like, what
Yeah,
if they
man.
found that it's back or something,
Yeah.
And then I think it's also an exercise in just being like, well, what are you gonna do about it? Like you have no
Right.
control here. It's better if there is something. It's better they find it, right? So it's learning to accept that there's things you can't control what
Mhm.
you can, and advocate for the best for yourself, and also learning to accept what you can't control. And I think that was very different from my competitive
Yeah.
sphere, where it's like you are in control no matter what, even if you're not. Like you have to shift your mindset to be that way, or else you start falling into an excuseville and you start being
Yeah.
you start making scrub quotes, right?
Right,
So
right, right.
it was a different exercise. Actually, I had to learn to separate that and accept, to go with the flow, whatever happens.
I have you heard the term Scanxiety? Is that like a term that you've heard before?
No, but that's
That's a
exactly what it is.
that yeah, that's like so that's like the known term in like the cancer community, I guess we'll say. Like Scanxiety. It was interesting
Right.
because like my oncologist here in New York, I like expressed that to him as soon as I came and started seeing him. He was like, "Oh, Scanxiety." I was like, "Oh, there's a word for that." Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right.
It's terrifying. I hate it. Do you have any like rituals, or like how do you sleep the day before or the night before?
Um, I don't have any rituals. I feel like I've gotten better about it. So it's never been
Yeah.
so extreme where it's like I can't sleep or anything like that.
Okay.
And to me, anxiety tends to, like, for those kind of moments, tends to peak like right before.
Right before. Okay.
Um
I'm a
like
night
more like the
before.
day of, as I'm over there driving
Yeah.
there. So I haven't had to like cope with it in that way, I would
Okay.
say, fortunately. And I think I'm dealing with it better now. The
Yeah.
first couple ones, I think the first one was the worst,
Yeah.
right?
Always
Like
is.
right after.
Hmm.
And I think that makes sense logic. I think just
It's like the most. It's the most likely that they're gonna find something with the first
exactly
one.
right. It's
Right.
like it's an indication of, was this surgery actually successful? What they
Right.
purported was actually the case, right? So
Hmm.
it's so getting over that hump was very relieving for me. And so no, I think I've been fortunate enough to just kind of deal with it. I might go get a coffee and something out. I treat myself after. Whenever I go to the doctor, I treat myself like I'm, like an 8-year-old, like I'm a
Yeah. Yeah.
McDonald's type of, get some coffee or a burger. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? I do a little treat after.
Absolutely. You got it.
So that's kind of the way I deal with it. Get a nice coffee,
Yeah.
get a sandwich or something, and that's kind of how I get over that hump, because once the scan is done, you don't get the results back right away, right? There's
No,
a
you don't.
delay.
Yeah.
So if I feel like, I don't know, treat yourself a little bit,
Treat yourself. Be
relax.
nice to yourself. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's great. I had the first times that I went back for scans, I would watch the entirety of the Last Dance documentary, the Michael Jordan documentary, and the '98
I
Bulls.
haven't seen that yet.
I don't know why it. I was just like I couldn't sleep, and I would just watch almost all 10 episodes like every night before, and it wasn't until like the second scan that I realized that I was doing it again. I was like, all right, I guess this is just a thing of mine. I guess before every
Right.
scan, I'm gonna watch a couple episodes of this documentary and go to sleep.
Do you feel
That's
like it's because it embodies some kind of like triumphant
I
spirit?
think I think maybe because when I was growing up, it was like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant were like my heroes, and I like played
Right.
basketball, and so I think there is a little bit of that like uh comfort in this is a
Mm,
champion that you kind of look up to, and this is how they got through their hard times, I guess. Yeah, yeah, there might be
right.
a little bit of that in that for sure, for sure. I never thought of it that way, but yeah, 100%. Um, is there anything that's all I had as far as the topics that I wanted to talk about? I feel like we could talk about this for as long as we wanted to,
Sure.
probably another hour at least. But I wanted to ask if there was anything else that you wanted to share that we didn't get to talk about, or anything, whether it's related to Street Fighter or kind of you having this experience, being in front of the community that you're kind of I would say a figurehead for. Anything that you want to share related to this or anything else?
Sure. I mean, the one thing I wanted to share, we've already talked about.
Hmm.
I think it's the most important thing is just to advocate for your own health.
Yeah.
It's so common in the American healthcare system to get brushed off or ignored, and that's not just for testicular cancer. That's for everything.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you're like, a woman, a minority, you hear it's worse, depending
Yeah.
on, unfortunately, that's a reality of people's experience.
100%.
So, if, white guy here can feel that kind of pressure, I feel like it's very common for other people to feel that pressure who might
Yeah.
not be in the same group. So always advocate for yourself if you feel like something's wrong. Not trying to make you guys hypochondriacs. There are times where the issue might be mental health, which is also something you should advocate for yourself before. But be your own biggest advocate.
Yeah.
And if you feel like something's wrong, do your research and mention specific treatments that you're considering. Your doctor might not mention specifically what you want. They might not mention an ultrasound, right? They might
Yeah.
just try to manually inspect you down there and brush it off. So just always be your biggest advocate and do your research. And treatments are always changing. Not every doctor is always up to date with what the best way to diagnose something
Mm-hmm.
is. So you have to do your due diligence. And we have the tools now. We have the internet. We have a lot of communities that can provide their experience as well. I'm sharing it. You're sharing it.
Mm-hmm.
Reddit.
Yeah.
These symptoms Reddit, you know what I mean? Find real people talking about their real experiences
Yeah.
and arm yourself with knowledge. And the other thing is, if you are diagnosed and you are going through treatment, I think one of the biggest emotional releases I had was, after I had my surgery, I still didn't announce it to the world until after I won one of the World Warrior tournaments for the Midwest, right?
Yeah.
It was 3 days after my surgery, and
Mm-hmm.
I needed the points, and I didn't even know if I was going to be able to play or not. And I was just like, whatever, I'm just going to hop on and see what happens. I put my controller on my lap. I was like, okay, it doesn't hurt
That's
too much.
so
I can play.
wild. That's so
And then
wild.
I actually ended up winning that tournament. And I just remember, like, I wasn't emotional really at all about this whole experience. And then after I won that, I was bawling my eyes out. I was
Yeah,
just like
dude.
crying
Damn.
so much after, because I feel like it really, I don't even know if I consciously had those thoughts beforehand, but after that I was like I'm still me.
You're still. I was literally just about to say that. You're still you.
Yeah.
You're still you.
Yeah.
I
It,
think
like
that's
it reaffirmed that, which I don't think you
hugely
need
powerful.
you shouldn't have to have some kind of like outside affirmation of success to validate those feelings.
But we're only human.
But I know we're human, so we're subject
Yeah.
to that. But I think that's something that everyone should remember. Like, even if you go through that change, you're still you. There's more to life after.
Yeah.
And there's lots of treatment options to help you feel like a man. I know that's also like the other thing we didn't
Oh
go
yeah,
into
we
is,
didn't
like,
get into
feeling like a
masculinity.
man,
Yeah, masculinity.
It's
Oh, dude.
so,
I mean,
like,
that's gosh. Maybe we should make this a
Yeah.
series, Brian. Well, that's a whole other
it's still
side of
there.
this. That's a whole
Yeah,
other side of this. And yeah, you're
I would
still
say there's
you.
still light at the end of the tunnel for that. Like, I feel like there's maybe it's unspoken, but grab life by the balls,
Yeah.
all these nut kind of references, right? Like, it's like the source of your masculine life,
Yeah.
but it's still there, right?
Yeah.
And if you need assistance because more severe treatment is required, that exists. We're in modern technology, modern
Yeah.
medicine. There's still assistance there. There's testosterone replacement stuff if you
Yep.
need to go down that route. If you only lose one nut, trust me, the other one will take over. Like, I've had no problems in that realm.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate. Back in the gym, things were going good. You know, like, it's just like life can move on. So just seek the treatment that you need and be hopeful about the future.
I really appreciate you taking the time out. For those of you who don't know, I'm running a charity tournament this upcoming Monday on the 29th, and we're going to be raising money for the Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation. All of the money that's going to be raised is going to go to direct donations to people who are struggling financially with their cancer journeys. So if you want, stop by. I'll have the link down below. Brian, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming out, sharing some wisdom, some knowledge, and your experience. You are still you, I'm still me, and we'll see you all another time.
All right. Thank you.